Welcome back to AM Northwest. Our next guest created a research lab to study the hidden forces that drive us, and she's cracked the code. Here to share some of the hidden rules to human behavior, we welcome back the author of Captivate, behavioral investigator Vanessa Van Edwards. Always good to see you, Vanessa.
Thanks for having me back.
I want to kind of go back to the beginning, where you learned what you've learned, because you learned it from like the top guy, Cal Lightman.
Yeah, the real Cal Lightman.
Which there's a TV show that I was hooked on called Lie to Me.
Yes, so I have always been fascinated by people, more like I couldn't figure them out. You know, I was like, why do people work the way they do? And then this show came out called Lie to Me, which is about human lie detection. And I found out that it was based on a real life man. His name is Dr. Paul Ekman, and he studies microexpressions, body language, lie detection. And so I got my training from him on microexpressions, subtle microexpression reading, and the show is based loosely on his life.
Right. Yeah. So tell me now about your research lab, what you've learned.
So I was always writing about people, and I was always interested about the academic studies. You know, there's all these hundreds of thousands of academic studies that come out every year, and they're lucky if 10 people read them. And I realized, what if we took those studies and we turned them into kind of real practical nuggets and then also big data? So I would take the recent studies and I would try to study them or to create a research experiment in my lab. So I have a research lab here in Portland, and we try to study, it's an excuse for me to ask invasively personal questions for my own amusement. So for example, we did a study on charisma where we asked people, who is the most charismatic person you know? And they gave us all these lists, and Portland is a pretty small place, so we were able to actually reach out and contact a lot of these people, and a lot of people had the same recommendations, even though they didn't know necessarily the people that were connected. 6 degrees of separation. We brought them into our lab and we tested them on everything we could think of. We looked at their body language, their PQ, their IQ, their interpersonal intelligence, and we found patterns of why certain people are more charismatic than others. So we're always on the hunt for interesting patterns about people.
What did you learn about charisma then?
So for charisma, it's this really weird trait where we know it the moment we see it, right? If someone walks into a room, we're like, oh yeah, that person's someone we want to know. We can spot it. But when you ask someone, what is charisma? People have a really hard time telling you. Like if you're like, how would you define it? People are like, it's that magnetic quality. So what we found is that charisma is a very specific blend of two traits: warmth or friendliness, niceness, kindness, and competence. Intelligence, power, credibility. That very highly charismatic people have this perfect sweet spot of those two traits. And it can be learned. That was my favorite part of the research study.
It can be learned,
I do not think I'm naturally charismatic at all. And so by studying these charismatic people, I could see the specific nonverbal cues. They're called encoding signals, signals they send out to the world that signal warmth and competence that anyone can learn.
And you also have tips for people, like if they're in a group or at a party.
Yes. So I networking events, parties, they always intimidated me. And so one of the experiments we did is we partnered with a couple local organizations, Mercy Corps, Girls Inc., and we asked them if we could do speed networking experiments. I think that you actually—
I was in one of those,
You were in one of my experiments. It was so cool to see you there, where we tracked every single person in the room. So we gave everyone a number assigned them. We had cameras in all corners of the room, and we tracked our super connectors. We found there were certain people at these events that had a lot of connections on LinkedIn. They collected the most business cards. They had the most animated conversations, and we discovered some of their secrets, and there's ways to work the room.
When it comes to body language, what did you learn? If someone is insecure or, you know, what would you say if they just did one thing? What could they do? So
the most important thing to think about for nervousness is what your body does automatically. So when we are nervous, we do what's called self-soothing behaviors. So we will touch our arms, or we'll crack our knuckles. You'll see guys will rub the back of their neck. And the reason they're doing that is because they're trying to produce a chemical called oxytocin. I'm sorry if I touched my mic, but there's a chemical, I don't know if you can see, I'm wearing it right now.
It's a necklace that shows.
It's a necklace that shows oxytocin. So oxytocin is the chemical that kind of makes you feel calm and belonging and okay. So when we touch ourselves or wring our hands, it makes us feel calm. So what I would say to nervous people from a body language perspective is make sure that you are, if you want to self-calm, you can actually like literally calm yourself down behind the scenes, but make sure that you're not touching your head or your face. We see that as humans as a very highly anxious cue. So touching your earring, biting your nails, rubbing at your eyes, those are the worst things you can do for charisma because it signals very, very high anxiety.
Okay, let's say someone's going to a job interview. What do you suggest they do?
Okay, the more space you can take up, the better. What I mean by this is when we see athletes or we see people who are very confident, they typically will have space between their arms and their torso. They roll their shoulders back and they usually have their head angled up and out. So when we see someone who's curled in, right, like wrapped in, we instantly think defeat or shame. So the best thing you can do for a job interview is get a chair that has armrests. Never use the low couch.
Okay.
You know when you walk into an office and you're like, where do I sit? Always take the highest chair with the armrests. Use your armrest and then try to use gestures to broad and expansively claim space.
And you'll do better in your job interview.
That's right.
Vanessa Van Edwards, the author of Captivate. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back with more AM Northwest. Don't go away.